The desert heat was so strong it felt like the sun itself was sitting on top of the jail yard. In the middle of Maricopa County's infamous tent city, hundreds of inmates stood packed together, wearing pink underwear and striped jumpsuits, sweating under the blazing Arizona sky. Guards shouted orders. The air smelled like dust, metal, and fear. And then, without warning, an entire row of canvas tents suddenly collapsed as a violent dust storm tore across the compound. Inmates screamed and stumbled, blinded by sand. Some tried to run for cover, others covered their faces, but the guards didn't move. They simply watched, shouting at inmates to stand still as the storm swallowed everyone. And at that very moment, Sheriff Joe Arpaio himself stepped outside, staring at the chaos like it was nothing more than another part of his prison empire. But what he said next shocked everyone so deeply that the whole camp went silent. But before we get to the words that froze the entire yard, we must go back to where it all began. Long before the dust storm rolled in, before the shouting and the fear, Maricopa County Jail had already become a place unlike anywhere else in the country. When Joe Arpaio was elected sheriff, he promised to be America's toughest sheriff, and he meant it. He wanted the whole world to see his jail system as a warning: break the law, and this is where you'll end up. One of his first decisions was to build Tent City, an outdoor jail made mostly of army tents. The desert heat could reach above 110 degrees, but Arpaio didn't care. He proudly told reporters that if military soldiers could sleep in tents overseas, then inmates could sleep in them too. The jail quickly became famous and feared. The inmates inside Tent City lived a life of strict rules. They received only cold meals like bologna sandwiches. If the food was warm, it was only because the sun had heated it. They slept on bunk beds under thin cotton tents that did nothing to keep out the heat or cold. Some days, the temperature inside the tents climbed so high the metal bed frames burned to the touch. Many inmates were scared. Others were angry. But everyone knew one thing: nothing happened in that jail without Sheriff Arpaio knowing. Among the inmates was Daniel Carter, a young man who had been arrested for a minor offense. Daniel had never imagined a place like this, where punishment seemed to go far beyond the crime. He saw older men fainting from heat. He watched others beg guards for water. He heard rumors that Arpaio wanted inmates to feel the heat so they wouldn't come back. At night, Daniel listened to the distant sounds of sirens and barking dogs from other parts of the jail system. Maricopa County Jail wasn't just Tent City. There were other facilities too, and each one had its own stories, its own problems. But Tent City was where Arpaio made his biggest statements, and Daniel had entered it at the worst possible time. As days passed, Daniel noticed something else. Certain inmates, especially Hispanic inmates, seemed to be treated more harshly. He watched as guards separated groups for reasons that didn't seem clear. Some inmates whispered that Arpaio didn't just want to punish people. He wanted to make examples out of certain communities. Tension built inside Tent City, like heat trapped inside a pressure cooker. Every day felt like something might snap. Sometimes, there were small moments when things calmed down, like when a fresh water tank arrived, or when clouds covered the sun for a few minutes. But the peace never lasted long. Daniel tried to stay quiet, tried not to get involved, but he couldn't ignore what he saw. Each day made him more aware that something wasn't right. Something big was coming. Everyone felt it, even if no one said it out loud. Then one afternoon, the air went still. The sky turned a strange brown color. Inmates looked up. Guards squinted at the horizon. A dust storm was rolling in fast. It hit Tent City with explosive force, tearing through tents, twisting metal poles, and sending sand whipping into everyone's eyes. Inmates coughed and stumbled. People screamed. And as the storm raged, Sheriff Arpaio walked into the yard, watching the chaos with no fear at all. He opened his mouth to speak, and at that exact moment, an inmate collapsed in front of everyone, sparking the extreme event that would change everything. The inmate hit the ground hard, his body shaking as dust swirled around him. Inmates shouted for help, but their voices were swallowed by the roaring wind. Guards hesitated, unsure whether to move or wait for orders. Sheriff Arpaio stared at the man on the ground, his face calm, almost cold. Finally, he shouted something that made the entire yard freeze. "He'll be fine. Stand your ground." The inmates stared in disbelief. The man on the ground was clearly not fine. His skin was pale, and his chest barely moved. Daniel Carter watched helplessly as sand piled against the man's clothes. Everything inside him screamed to run and help, but he knew one thing. In Tent City, stepping out of line meant trouble. Big trouble. But just as the storm began to calm, a guard rushed forward against orders, kneeling beside the collapsed inmate. The guard shouted for medical support. Arpaio's jaw tightened, but he didn't stop him. Maybe even he knew the situation was too serious to ignore. As medics arrived and carried the unconscious inmate away, the yard slowly settled. The storm passed, leaving torn tents flapping in the wind and sand covering everything like a dirty blanket. Inmates coughed and tried to brush the dust out of their hair. The guards shuffled around, checking damage. But the storm wasn't the real problem. What everyone felt deep down was the growing fear. Fear of the place they were trapped in, fear of the rules that didn't make sense, and fear of the man who ran the entire jail like his own kingdom. After the chaos, the inmates were ordered back into what was left of their tents. Daniel sat on his bunk, still shaken. His friend Marcus, another inmate, whispered, "You saw how he looked at us. Like we're nothing." Daniel nodded. "That man needed help." "We all need help," Marcus said. "But this place, it's built to break us." The night that followed was unusually quiet. The storm had cooled the air, but the silence made the jail feel even more tense. Every sound, every cough, every footstep felt louder than it should. Daniel couldn't sleep. Neither could many others. Hours later, long past midnight, the guards did their routine patrol. They walked slowly, shining flashlights across the tents. One guard paused near Daniel's tent. He lowered his voice and whispered, "Keep your head down tomorrow. Things are changing." Daniel's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" The guard didn't answer. He only walked away, leaving Daniel with more questions. But the next morning, Daniel found out what the guard meant. Word spread fast that the Department of Justice had begun investigating Arpaio's jail practices. People said they were looking into claims of misconduct, especially toward Hispanic inmates. Some said investigators would be visiting soon. Others said Arpaio was furious about the investigation. For the first time since Daniel had arrived, inmates felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe things would finally change. But hope inside Tent City was dangerous. Too much of it could get someone hurt. As the sun rose higher, 2 Hispanic inmates were pulled aside by a group of guards. No explanation, no warning. They were lined up near the fence, their faces tense. Other inmates watched, unsure what was happening. Daniel whispered to Marcus, "Why them?" Marcus shook his head. "Because they can." A guard shouted at the inmates to step back, but curiosity kept eyes glued to the fence. One of the Hispanic inmates tried to speak, but a guard pushed him against the wire. Daniel clenched his fists. Something about this felt wrong, very wrong. The guards looked nervous, like they were expecting something or trying to hide something. Then, without warning, one of the inmates at the fence shouted, "You can't treat us like this." That one sentence set everything off. A guard grabbed him, the inmate resisted, and suddenly a struggle broke out. The other Hispanic inmate tried to help his friend, and within seconds the yard erupted. Inmates shouted, guards rushed in, and chaos exploded like a match tossed into dry grass. Daniel watched as the crowd surged forward. Some inmates screamed for calm. Others shouted in anger. The guards tried to control the situation, but it was growing too fast. And then it happened. One guard swung his baton, striking an inmate in the head, causing blood to spill across the sand. The entire jail froze, every eye locked on the bleeding man, as tension reached a breaking point that would change everything that followed. The inmate staggered backward, his hands flying to his head as blood poured between his fingers. The yard fell silent. Even the guards froze, their weapons half raised, unsure what to do next. The wounded inmate collapsed onto the sand, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then everything snapped. Inmates rushed forward, not to fight, but to shield the injured man. They surrounded him, forming a human wall. Guards shouted orders, but no one moved. Fear, anger, and desperation mixed in the hot air like electricity. Daniel stood right in the middle of it all, heart pounding so hard he felt it in his teeth. Sheriff Arpaio marched into the yard, his boots crunching against the sand. His face was red with anger. "Back away," he shouted. "All of you." No one moved. The guards looked at Arpaio, waiting for his command. The inmates looked at Arpaio, waiting for any sign of mercy. But Arpaio wasn't known for mercy. He glared at the circle of inmates standing over the injured man. "You're choosing the wrong side," Arpaio said coldly. The tension grew so thick it felt like the heat itself pressed down on everyone. Daniel looked at the bleeding inmate and knew he couldn't stay silent. He stepped forward, voice shaking but loud enough to be heard. "He needs a doctor," Daniel said. "He's not fighting. He's dying." A few guards shifted uncomfortably. Even they couldn't ignore the blood soaking into the desert sand. For the first time, Arpaio hesitated. Just a second, but long enough for everyone to see it. The investigators from the Department of Justice were scheduled to arrive any day now. Any violent incident could make things worse for him. Much worse. Finally, he growled, "Medical team." Now, relief washed over the inmates as medics ran in and lifted the injured man onto a stretcher. But the fear didn't go away. The yard was still thick with tension, and no one knew what would happen next. When the medics left, Arpaio turned away without another word, marching back toward the administration building. The guards slowly backed off, and the inmates spread out again, whispering in low voices. Daniel felt dizzy from the heat and stress. Marcus grabbed his shoulder. "You shouldn't have spoken," he said quietly. "He'll remember you." "I couldn't just watch," Daniel replied. Over the next few hours, Tent City felt different, quieter, heavier. Rumors spread that Arpaio was furious, that he was planning something to restore order. Inmates stayed close to their tents, waiting for whatever came next. Just before sunset, a group of federal investigators arrived. Their cars rolled through the gates, drawing every eye in the yard. The investigators walked with clipboards and cameras, talking to guards, inspecting tents, watching how inmates were treated. Hope flickered again through the camp, but it was small and fragile. One investigator even approached Daniel and asked what he had seen. Daniel glanced around nervously, but answered truthfully. He told them about the heat, the food, the collapse during the dust storm, and what had happened at the fence. The investigator listened carefully and took notes. When they walked away, Marcus whispered, "You just painted a target on your back." "Maybe," Daniel said, but someone had to tell the truth. Night came, cooler than usual. The yard lights flickered on, buzzing quietly. Inmates settled into their bunks, some whispering about the investigation, others praying for change. For the first time, Daniel felt like maybe, just maybe, things would be different. But peace never lasted long in Tent City. Just after midnight, loud footsteps echoed through the yard. Floodlights snapped brighter. Daniel jolted awake. Guards surrounded the tents, far more guards than usual. Their faces were hard and unreadable. The door to Daniel's tent flew open. "You," a guard said, pointing straight at him. "Get up. Now." Daniel's heart dropped. Marcus tried to step forward, but a guard shoved him back. Daniel stood slowly, fear crawling up his spine. "What did I do?" "Sheriff wants to see you," the guard said. "Right now." Other inmates peeked out of their tents, whispering nervously as Daniel was grabbed by the arm and marched across the yard. The walk felt endless, every step echoing like a drumbeat. When they reached the tall gates leading to the administration building, Daniel swallowed hard. Something terrible was waiting on the other side. He could feel it. The guard unlocked the door, pulled it open, and shoved Daniel inside. And standing there in the dim hallway was Sheriff Joe Arpaio himself, waiting with a look that told Daniel his life was about to change forever.